is Ritik, your biology subject matter expert from MEMONEET. And in this video, we are going to study another very important two topics. One is the C4 pathway, and the last one is the factors which are going to affect the photosynthesis and plants. So when I'm talking about the C4 pathway, so you have know that the plants also they do develop, they do grow, and they are also, they are present even in some dry region, tropical region and all, right? So that means they actually do adopt to those dry tropical regions, right? So those plants which actually adopted to the dry tropical region, they actually have or they go through the C4 pathway. Okay. So though these plant have the C4, what do you say that oxaloacetic acid as the first carbon dioxide fixation product. So they also use the C3 pathway or the Kelvin cycle as a main biosynthetic pathway. So what actually happens in the C4 plants are C4 plants, they are actually very special kind of plants. They have a special type of leaf anatomy, that is they are able to tolerate with high temperature. So they show a response to high light intensity like sunlight, okay? And they lack a process called as photorespiration. What do you mean by photorespiration? That means what happens? They evaporate excess amount of water. So that is photorespiration. So in the plants, you are going to see the absence of this process and have greater productivity of the biomass. So yeah, this is the C4 pathway here. So particularly when I'm talking about the C4 pathway, yeah, you're going to see a large cells around the vacuoles bundle or vascular bundles of the C4 plant that are actually called as what? Bundle sheath. Okay. So bundle sheath cells and the leaves which have such anatomy are said to have crane's anatomy, which means weather and is reflection of the arrangement of the cells. That means if this is one cell, exactly the other cell will be the reflection of the same cell and they will be arranged in that manner itself. So the bundle sheath cells may form several layers around the vascular bundles. They are characterized by having large number of the chloroplast. So thick wall, immense to gaseous exchange, and no intercellular space in between. So you may like to see, for example, if we cut a section of especially the plants, like C4 plants, leaves of the C4 plants, say like maize, okay, or sorghum. So we are going to observe this anatomy here and the distribution of the mesophyll cell. How I'll explain you. See, so yeah, this pathway that has been named as the Hatch and Stark pathway is again a cyclic process. So what happens in this pathway is the primary carbon dioxide acceptor is three carbon molecule, that is phosphophenol pyruvate, phosphenol pyruvate, PEP. So and is present in the mesophyll cells. So what actually happens is the enzymes which is responsible for the fixation is the PEP enzyme, that is PEP carboxylase. Okay. So PEP carboxylase is one which is responsible for the fixation of this, what do you say that, the CO2. So either you can call it as the PEP carboxylase or PEP case. Okay. So it is an important to register that the mesophyll cells lacks rubisco enzymes, that is which we discussed in C3 cycle. So what happens here is the C4 acid, that is OAA, is formed in the mesophyll cells. So can you see here? Yeah. So here, as you can see here, this phosphenol pyruvate, which I was discussing you, right? So it is the one which I told you, the primary CO2, right? So you are observing the fixation of this. So where that is C4 acid. The C4 acid, that is OAA, is formed in where? It is actually formed in the mesophyll cells, right? So it then form other four carbon compounds like you can see the malic acid or aspartic acid in the mesophyll cell itself, which are transported to the bundle sheet cells. So once it is formed, it will be transferred. That the C4 acids are nothing but what? That's what C4 acid, that is CAA OAA, this is what I'm calling, right? So it is formed where it is actually formed inside the mesophyll cells. And you will be seeing here that is decarboxylation. You're going to observe what? Decarboxylation. So after decarboxylation, you're going to see the C3 acid here. Okay. So once the C3 acid is formed, like malic acid, uh, or right itself. So then they are being transported. So three C3 cycle is nothing but what? So it is nothing but the malic acid or the aspartic acids, right? So they will be transported to the bundle sheet again or bundle sheet cells. So in the bundle sheet cells, these C4 acids are broke down, okay, to release CO2 and three carbon molecules once again. So as now you can understand this, the C carbon molecules that you are seeing, they will be transported back to the mesophyll where it is converted to what? PEP again. Okay. Thus, this will lead to the completion of the cycle. So CO2 released in the bundle sheet now, then that which is released, right? That enters the C3 or Kelvin pathway, a pathway which is common in all the plants. So the bundle sheet cells are rich in the enzymes that is ribosco, biphosphate, carboxylase, oxygenase, that is ribosco, right? Uh, but they do lack in what? PEP case, right? Then PEP case, that is nothing but phosphophenol pyruvate case. So thus the basis pathway that results in the formation of the sugar, the Kelvin pathway, or it's actually called as the C3 pathway and C4 pathway. That means in most of the plant like maize or wherever which high temperature and all those plants, they have another special pathway which is called as C4 pathway. Okay. And C3 pathway is very common in each and every photosynthesis plants, that is grain plants. Clear? So this is how the process of carbon dioxide fixation happens. Clear? Then we are moving to the factors which are going to affect the photosynthesis. So yeah, what are the factors which are actually going to affect the photosynthesis? So the first one is the photosynthesis is under the influence of several factors, right? It could be both internal and external factors. Internal factors, in sense, within the plants, and external factors. The plants factors includes the number of that the plant size, age, then the orientation, arrangement of the leaves, mesophyll cells, then uh, phosphopla, then chloroplast, then internal CO2 concentration and the amount of the chlorophyll which is present. Then the plant or internal factors are dependent on the genetic prediscription and the growth of the plant also. Coming to the external factor, it would be through the sunlight, temperature, carbon dioxide concentration, and water concentration, nutrients, as well as a plant photosynthesis. All these factors will stimulate it is going to affect the rate. Hence, So several factors interact and simultaneously it is going to affect the photosynthesis or the carbon dioxide fixation. Okay. Using one factor is a usually one factor is a major cause or in one that actually limits the rate of reaction. Hence, at any point of the rate will be determined by the factors available at sub-optional level. Blackman's in 1905, he proposed a law of limiting factors, so that came into an effect. So this states that if a chemical process is affected by more than one factor, okay. So if a chemical, yeah, if a process is affected by more than one factor, then its rate will be determined by the factor which is nearest to its minimum value. That is, it is the factor which directly affects the process if its quality is changed. So that means if there is any change in the chemical, if it is going to affect, okay, one or the other way. So that means if a chemical process that which happens within the plant, so if that is affected, right, either because of one or more factors, then what happens? So that is directly going to affect the process of the quality, right? That is the process of photosynthesis or the process of CO2 fixation. For example, despite of presence of green leaf and optimal light. That means despite if a plant is having a green leaf, it has a proper optimum light and even the carbon dioxide concentration also. But the plant may not photosynthesis if the temperature is very low. So this leaf, if given the optimum temperature, it is going to photosynthesis. The next factor that we can study is the light. So we need to distinguish between the light here. Yeah. So we need to distinguish between the light quality, light intensity, and the distribution of the exposure to the light, how a plant is exposed to the light. While discussing light as a factor that is going to affect the photosynthesis. So here is the line relationship between the incidental line where intensity, and the rate of photosynthesis. Okay. Yes, the rate of photosynthesis. Uh, yeah. Uh, so at high temperature or sorry, at high light intensity, what happens? Gradually, the rate does not show further increase. So if rate of photosynthesis at what happens, high intensity of light, you are going to see that it is not going to show further photosynthesis, and that becomes a factor of limiting. So when what is intensity? Okay. Hence, except for plants in shades or in a dense forest, that is the plant which are in a shady region, or if it is in a dense forest, light is rarely a limiting factor in nature. Increase in incident light behind a point causes a breakdown of the chlorophyll and decreases in the photosynthesis. That means if the light intensity is more, that will lead to the breakdown of the what do you say that the chlorophyll, and if there is a breakdown of chlorophyll, that is going to decrease the photosynthesis rate. Then we have carbon dioxide concentration. Carbon dioxide is actually a major limiting factor for the photosynthesis. So if its concentration is very low in the atmosphere, increase in the concentration up to 0.05% can cause an increase in carbon dioxide fixation rate, which is again behind the level. So that is also going to become a damaging over longer period. So N2 pathway, that is C4 pathway, which is responsible for the fixation of the carbon dioxide, and the C3 pathway, where in normal plants, you will be seeing the absence of C4 pathway. So, but in every plants, we know that C3 pathway is common. That is, it is going to utilize the carbon dioxide and ATP is released, whatever it is. So, in both. plants responsible differently. Like C4 pathway, they have the ability to tolerate at high concentration of the CO2. But whereas in C3 pathway, it is unable. Okay. So at low light condition, neither group responds to the but what happens if the condition of light is very less? Okay. So then what happens? Even C4 or C3 pathway is not going to respond to the higher concentration of the CO2. Okay, that means if light itself is not there, then obviously there will be no way of, utilizing the higher concentration of the carbon dioxide. At high light intensity, both the C3 and C4 plants, shows increase in the rate of the photosynthesis. What is important that we need to note is NC4 plant shows saturation, okay, of this like 360 microliter per one. Like while in the C3, it responds to the increase. If there is in C3 pathway, what happens if there is an increase in the CO2 concentration? So you are going to see the saturation curve more, like 450 microliter. So thus the curve available of the CO2 level is limited to the C3 plant. So that means what happens, the CO2 concentration, if it is more, it is limited to C3 plant only. So the fact that the C3 plant responds to the higher concentration of the CO2 by showing increased rate of photosynthesis leads to higher productivity has been used for some greenhouse crops such as tomato and bell pepper. So they are allowed to grow in a carbon dioxide enriched atmosphere that leads to what? High yield. Right. So the next one is temperature, which is very important. The dark reaction in temperature, what happens? The dark reactions being enzymatic are temperature what controlled. So they are temperature controlled here. So through the light reactions are also temperature sensitive. They are affected to a much less extent. Like in C4 plant responds to the high temperature and shows high rate of photosynthesis, while C3 plant at high temperature, you much lower temperature plant have a much lower temperature optimum. That means C3, C4 plant, they responds to the higher temperature and show high rate of photosynthesis. While in C3 pathway, what happens? Let us C3 plants, what happens? They have a much lower temperature optimum. So the temperature optimum for the photosynthesis of different plant also depends on the habit that they have adopted to. Like the tropical plant have higher temperature optimum than the plant adopted to temperate climate. Then the water. Even though the water is one of the reactant in the light reaction, the effect of water as a factor is more through its effects on the plant also, rather it's directly on the photosynthesis. So how? Water stress causes the stomata to close, hence reduces the CO2 availability. One thing. Okay. Beside water stress also makes leaves wilt. Okay. Thus reducing the surface area of the leaf and their metabolic activity as well as. So that's why indirectly water is also going to, like, not directly but rather directly on the photosynthesis. And this was all about the C4 pathway as well as the factors which are going to affect the photosynthesis. So yeah, if you still feel any doubts, you can reach me out to the comment section. And very important, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and also share with your friends. Thank you.